Good morning, everyone. My name is Willson Deng, and I'm with Arcstone. I'm here today to talk about the importance of manufacturing sustainability, but one step beyond that is also look into the supply chain processes of sustainability as well, and how do companies start tackling that, and how do we actually start wrapping our heads around this entire concept as well. So one of the things about sustainability in manufacturing is they tend to be very large-scale CapEx investments. We're talking about deploying essentially solar panels onto the roofs of factories. We're doing large scale recovery projects of recycling material and content. Those are fantastic initiatives that go through, but as you can imagine, for a small, medium business, that's going to be pretty intensive to actually launch. But there's more to that in sustainability than just those large capex investments. It's really about what's happening deeper into the facility on the day-to-day activities and what's happening across the supply chain as well. And in order for us to do any sort of improvement on those processes, we need data and we need transparency and we need trust in the visibility, not just within our own factories, but across the supply chain and all of our suppliers in that network as well. And here comes kind of that first main problem. The information isn't necessarily always available. Of the sustainability reports that are being generated for manufacturers, not all of them are either validated or verified, or they might not actually be providing the most accurate of information, especially for the parts and components that you need in your own production process to finish that particular product that you're delivering and producing. So what does it mean for a manufacturer then? If you're a small SME looking into sustainability, yes, I can throw money into investing into the larger scale processes, but there's also the day-to-day, there's also the supply chain. How do I improve those processes? So the way that Argstrom has looked at this and the way to, again, leverage standards to manage this process is that we have to think about the whole process of sustainability in two factors, but it's really two sides of the same coin. A lot of us as business owners that are trying to improve factory operations, to improve efficiency, improve productivity, improve quality, that is one of the main things that we always have to focus on. But a lot of folks then tend to think that sustainability is a separate issue. It's a separate item. It's meant for someone else to tackle. But it's actually not. The effects of improving operational efficiency is actually translatable to sustainability improvements as well. Just imagine a machine running more efficiently uses less electricity. A machine that's running more impactfully is going to be producing less wastage or less bad quality product that needs to be reworked. All of these are part and parcel of the same concept. If we start pairing them together, if we start measuring them together, not just within our own factories, but across our suppliers and helping our suppliers do better, then we're seeing an improvement overall of sustainability across the supply chain. Now, in order for this to happen, this is a very cohesive network that we need to link together. And when we talk about that, that gets quite complicated. So, for example, in order for us to see the whole end-to-end process, it's not just about looking at my own factory specifically. That process I can measure to a rough degree. I can see, for example, the energy that I put in. That might just be a power meter that I read at the end of the month. Not the best way to do it, but I can improve on that over time. I can start attaching sensors, I can attach additional devices to measure that process. But what happens when you go one layer down for the parts and components that you're sourcing in to be able to achieve this? And another layer down, which would be the sub-suppliers or sub-sub-suppliers all the way back. In order for me to get the end-to-end visibility and transparency, that's truly what I'm going to need, especially for my own processes, to know if I'm sourcing from the ideal suppliers or is there better ones out there? And eventually, this is information that I'm going to have to report to my customers, as my customers are going to be demanding that I report where I source my materials from. Is it from a reliable facility? And what was the environmental impact of that process as well? And these are the things where we're seeing more demand for and more importance for. Now, when we look deeper into the process of what's happening in our customers' minds, which is the manufacturers themselves, this might not be at top of mind, but it might be later on. And it might be something that may prohibit you from being able to sell to others if we don't have these things in place. So when we look at sustainability, it's not just about immediate improvements, which we will talk about in a little bit, but it's also about getting future-proofed so that when you're exporting into countries where the regulations are becoming more and more extreme and more important for the environment, the only way to make sure that we're ready for this is to have the data be prepared and have the data be ready. However, that's not necessarily always the headache that we're trying to resolve. The headache, for example, is how do we even get started? There is a huge lack of data transparency available within the manufacturing space. And this is not just within Singapore, this is obviously, as you can imagine, throughout the region as well. Manufacturers are struggling with this concept. And how do you capture this data and how do you make sure that it is in the right format, it's in the right standards? That becomes a big problem as well. And where is the ROI? Obviously, everyone asks the same question. Where is the return on investment? This is something where it's very difficult to see if we don't pair it with the operational effectiveness side or the operational efficiency side. And so we're going to go through some examples of this where we're seeing great results of how companies can transform not just by improving efficiency and how that is then reported as sustainability improvements as well, because they are, like we said before, two sides of the same coin. Now, first and foremost, in terms of all this that we're talking about, is that if we don't get the raw information back from the original source, a lot of our calculations within just our factories alone is not sufficient. And this is kind of where the hard part comes in. If you imagine the parts and components that you're producing inside your facilities now, you're sourcing raw materials from all over the world. And especially being in Singapore, a lot of your materials are going to be from the outside. It's unavoidable. And as you continue to go further back in the supply chain, we're talking about the source of the raw material. That could be coming from the farm, the oil rig, the mining site, the forest, wherever it may be coming from. And that process going through the material processing and going through sub-suppliers that are doing sub-assemblies and procedures to that, all of that matters. If there's no visibility into that process, it then becomes very difficult to actually do the end-to-end calculations. So first and foremost is really getting the whole ecosystem ready to work with you. And this isn't easy. Sharing information is never easy. Sometimes getting the information isn't easy either. But this is the starting point of having that collaborative discussion with your suppliers and finding ways to say, here are some standard reports that are necessary for us to start funneling upwards. And we're not here to invent any new standards. There are standards that are available now that we want to leverage. There may be new ones that the world will start to adopt over time. But the standard ones on the top right, the ISO standards, as you can see, are the standard ones we will continue to use. And it's important to you to always leverage these standards because if you invent something new, likely it might not be adopted on a global scale. This is a very global initiative that is being pushed right now, and we're still waiting for some new metrics to come out as governments start to enforce some of these regulatory conditions. But we don't want to be the ones that come out and start inventing new areas. So when we talk to our suppliers and we talk to our sub-suppliers, building that relationship to say, I'm going to need information from you that will be passed upwards so that we all end up benefiting. And here's why. A lot of people tend to hide some of the sustainability kind of processes, but those are going to need to be improved one way or another. But secondly, it's that it has a competitive advantage when we can actually see the data flowing. One of them is being able to work with your suppliers to be able to do better. Like we said, if we are able to improve sustainability, we can also improve the operational efficiency of the process as well. The other portion is that we got to just be ready. If we're going to be able to take advantage of additional markets and to be able to sell to additional markets, we have to have this information ready to go. And it has to be supply chain wide. It can't just be my own facility. And last but not least is that the consumer demand and what consumers are willing to pay for as part of that margin is really starting to shift, especially when you look into Europe. If you look into North America, we are seeing more and more that are willing to pay higher rates and higher margins on the same products as long as they know they have the transparency and also that they have the sustainability metrics to back that sustainability up. And to prove that it is that sustainable, there is a willingness to pay, which again is something that everyone is trying to move towards, the higher end of that value spectrum. So in order for us to actually be able to achieve this, we need data from the shop floor to flow upwards. And so a lot of this is, you hear people talking about scope 1, scope 2, but this is really about scope 3 integration processes. We're talking about at the ground level of your suppliers, working with them to be able to collect information as much as possible, make it easy, make it free, make it consistently updated through the foundations of an MES. That's the most ideal. MES is something that you would use day in and day out throughout the organization. And if that is part of the data collection process, either through sensors, either through manual key in, we can't always sensorize everything. That's something that we have to be realistic with. There will be plenty of suppliers, and even within maybe your own facilities, where you're not going to have exact sensor-based reliability of data for the sustainability metrics. But what we do need is some form of an input. And that's really about the MES layer to capture that process, because an MES helps you with the automation layer of capturing, or it could help you with the manual capturing process. And as that's fed up, it's being linked together across a global network, because a supply chain isn't just about one location. It is going to be quite broad. We're going to source all those raw materials from and components from. And when you're able to assemble all this together and aggregate it into a central site, that is where we're going to have that end-to-end transparency available. And this pulls all of that particular processes in, monitoring each of the necessary suppliers you have, overseeing what it is that they're doing, getting the information that they are supplying into their MES, and linking that together. However, we can help streamline that process. That's what's going to help build that kind of network to be able to see that whole end-to-end process. Now, here are some examples that I wanted to go through that's quite important to remember, is that whole concept about operational efficiency and sustainability, two sides of the same coin. We have an example here of a FMCG company that has been really driving a lot on OEE improvement processes. And you imagine in your own factories and your own facilities, there's a lot of this happening. You're trying to improve the overall quality, making sure your machines are running properly, but also minimizing unplanned downtime processes. Unplanned downtime is probably one of the worst things that can happen with your equipment. Why is that the equipment then stops? It's still sucking electricity, or it may be producing bad materials and no one's turned it off yet, which basically means that you are wasting energy, wasting time, wasting resources, or you're having to do a lot of rework or throwing away materials because whatever was produced is not sellable, is not usable. If you're able to minimize that, not only do you improve OEE, for example, you definitely are looking at improving sustainability. And most of the time, no one translates to what is the sustainability improvement. So for this particular facility, we're looking at savings in terms of tens of thousands of pounds of CO2 that was removed from the environment, simply because their efficiency in terms of their equipment is that much better. Their quality control is that much better. Their ability to not produce scrap is that much better. The amount of unplanned downtime where the machine is just on, but no one's servicing and it's not producing, which is just wasted electricity, is that much better. And that's where you see the two sides of that coin coming together. So a lot of the improvements that you're seeing in your facilities now, start to look at reporting them, figuring out how to actually calculate that particular return. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to apply sensors everywhere. As long as there is some form of an MES, some form of a simple tool that you're using to record the improvements that you've made and the subsequent improvements in terms of materials and energy savings that has been done, you're actually taking positive steps towards sustainability, right? And this is kind of the concept that you want to propagate down the supply chain process as well. And this is about really working closer with your suppliers. And this might be a new concept because most of the time we treat suppliers, or essentially the whole vendor network concept, as I pay you, you give me, and that's the end of the day. But sustainability doesn't work in that manner. Sustainability is that if I do better in my own facility, if my suppliers don't do better, the overall impact to the environment doesn't necessarily improve that much. I need everyone to play ball. And in order for us to do that, we need to have that traceability to know where within my supply chain do I see the biggest impact of my processes, right? PET bottles, for example, here, if you're going all the way back down to the sub components of how the bottles are produced, how it's being filled, and transport processes that are going through, where is my biggest source of carbon impact? And depending on where you're sourcing from, that can make a big difference. And if you have no visibility into this process, you can not only improve, you won't be able to even tell your customers, for example, that are now demanding this information to see what was the impact in total. So this is kind of where, again, it's not just about single factory operations, it's about the whole operations all coming together. And it requires a new mindset. It's about using the standard metrics and the standard ISO standards that are out there, not inventing something new, but reporting that through a centralized system so that each of your suppliers, all the way back down to the source of the raw material, can leverage a standard platform that funnels this information in and provides you as perhaps the finished good, or you may be one of the suppliers in that channel as well, to be able to funnel that information upwards to the final OEM or to the final factory or to the final brand that needs this information to improve productivity in general, but also improve sustainability transparency in general, so that the overall margin, the overall capability to sell and improve the environment is also possible here as well. So the intention, I hope that what I've given here is that the importance of sustainability and transparency cannot be just within one facility. It has to be with your suppliers. And in order to do so, start with the MES as a data generation toolset. That helps with the overall reporting mechanisms, that helps to actually be able to translate whatever you're doing in terms of operational improvement to sustainability improvement. And this is where ArcStone then works with companies to actually calculate the end-to-end process through standardized platform toolsets. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time here. I'm really excited to see how we can actually work together as well. As we mentioned here, the whole process is that it can't be one facility alone. It's about working together to be able to achieve this. So for folks that are keen to actually learn more, to actually run this within your network or run this within your supply chain network and have an end-to-end calculation at the finished good that level that you're working on, we'd be very happy to connect and go further here together. So sustainability is not a one company or a one vendor effort. It's going to be a global effort. And I'm looking forward to doing that together with you as well. Thank you so much for your time.